Hello and welcome to all of you watching the first episode of our new show called Out of Session. Councilor Brandon Robbins and I have talked about doing a show that will give the public a little bit more information about things going on at the City Council and other boards in the city. This particular project that we're talking about today, the Orchard Hill Park Extension residential development, is a very important project, and it has finally motivated Brandon and I to organize this. So with that said, we have a lot to cover today, and I just wanted to introduce everybody who's here. Councilor Brandon Robbins, Donna Molet, a Ward 1 North Leominster resident, former Ward 1 Councilor David Rowlands, former Ward 1 Councilor and Harvard Street resident Bill Brady, and we have Hailey Brady waiting in the wings who will join us in a little while. So with that said, we have a lot to cover today, so we're going to jump right into it. We will start with David Rowlands, former Ward 1 Councilor, and he's going to give us some context and some history on the MU2 zoning. Dave.
Thank you. So I've had the pleasure of being involved in one way or another with Orchard Hill Parks for quite a few years, even prior to running for Ward 1 Councilor. So I think it's really important to understand the history of the zoning that happened here, in part to see what worked, what didn't work, and it's important that we don't sort of make the same mistakes we made in the past historically. Originally, this land was zoned industrial, and I'm talking about now going back to the late 90s and early 2000 in that time frame. It was zoned industrial land, and there was a movement in the city to develop not only Orchard Hills, but also the Walmart Lowe's area. Those were two big industrial elements in the city that were not being developed. They didn't have infrastructure, and there was a desire to develop those. And what the city did was it contracted with a gentleman from UMass, and it set up what we call mixed use. And mixed use was designed, and I think it was a very good design, to say, hey, use commercial development to pay for the infrastructure and limit it to only 30% of the sites. And then remaining 30% could be used for the industrial use, for job creation, quality, companies coming to the city, and sort of build it that way. And that's what went into effect. And the way it was defined, there was 4 different uses, and the developers could pick any 2. The first 3 were industrial by right, which was like a research center, manufacturing, and an office building. And then they threw commercial in with the limitation of 30%. And that's how it started. Not long into that process, the developers of the Walmart area came through and modified, or asked for the modified of the zoning, and said, we're just a little confused, we want some more clarity. And they added like 4 more items to the list, including a store, a bank, and a restaurant, which were commercial uses, but they were smart enough to add them to the list. And the criteria of selecting any 2 never changed. So what that meant, and this is really where the caution is, what that meant is that any 2 uses, which turned out to be a restaurant and a store, were now allowed by right to build on industrial land. This is the danger you get into when you have developers driving zoning. We know zoning is from our perspective of living in the city and working for the city, that it should be quality growth, it should be protect the integrity of the neighborhoods and protect the integrity of the quality of life here. Developers have a separate thing. It's all about profit. We understand that, and you have to balance those demands. So there was a lot of issues because mixed use didn't work. There was some attempts to change it. They didn't happen. And there was a lot of unhappiness amongst the council at the time. We were doing a lot of special permits, and this is the time that I got on the council. And so there was a lot of pressure, a lot of asks to the mayor to do something about zoning. And the mayor hired a new company to come into the city and redo our zoning. And I was a legal affairs chairman at that time. This company came in and spent a good year rewriting the zoning and meeting with people. Anyways, they sent down a 200-page document of a completely redone zoning document to the city council. And it was sent to the planning board, and they gave back a small amount of review on that. And we literally spent hundreds of man-hours in subcommittee meetings going line by line by line over a 200-page document. We removed 40 pages of all kinds of stuff. In that time frame of 2013, the mixed use was removed, and there was an MU2 district, which is in Orchard Hill. That's when that came into effect. But there was a vision then to say, hey, we understand there's a need for housing, but we also have to balance that against what was good for the neighborhood, what was good for Ward 1. So there was a balance that we put in place with different restrictions, which I'm sure we're going to get into. So that's the history of how MU2 came about.
Yep.
And why we're where we are today.
Yeah, I remember those hearings, the Legal Affairs Subcommittee meetings, because I was on the council at the time and went to a few. But there were hundreds and hundreds of, I mean, that's no exaggeration, the time and effort that went into doing that. So that's really helpful. So the project that we're talking about right now, which is the residential development, about 300 high-end rental units, became possible. We're going to take a little step back here. A few years ago, the city applied for a grant from the MassWorks state agency, got $2.1 million to build a road to an industrial complex, 2 industrial buildings, and I'm going to show that map. Perfect. So this, what you're seeing right now, this is a plan that was submitted with the MassWorks grant. Again, that's $2.1 million of taxpayers' money was used to build a road, which you can see in that bottom right. There's a little cul-de-sac. You can see the land kind of curves right around that little end of the cul-de-sac. That big building at the top was 234,000 square feet of industrial space. What was it, Donna? Industrial complex?
It's called an industrial complex inside the grant application. Yes.
Inside, yep. And then to the left, you see another little teeny building, and I guess that was going to be manufacturing. So the city got a $2.1 million grant, taxpayer funds, to build a road to this industrial complex, which was supposed to create 300 new jobs. The next,
if I could just intervene
absolutely,
in that,
Bill, yeah,
with the road, because I was on the council when we did that final
That's
vote,
right.
and I've known Greg for a long time, have a lot of respect for him, and said to him, I said, this literally is in my backyard. I said, will we as abutters, will we have substantial distance in between where he builds and where the residences are? And I was assured that would happen, and I took him on his word, and I voted for it.
That's right. We all did. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the frustration we have as residents there. We're not against growth at all.
Absolutely.
Not. Who wants to pay more tax dollars? We need to build, but it's responsible growth.
Right. So right now, we are looking at the plan that was submitted. See that little cul-de-sac down at the, again, on the right-hand side, the lower quarter there. So this road that was built with taxpayer dollars, the MassWorks grant, is now leading to a huge residential development. And this is a plan that was submitted, I think, a few months ago, but it's been changed a little bit. It's been tweaked a little bit. So what you're looking at is a plan for 308 apartments, 450 or something in terms of the parking spots.
Down.
Yeah,
It's gone down a little bit.
It went down to 294. But the scale is still pretty much the same. The density is reduced by a tiny bit in there. And I wanted to show this because I want to talk with Brandon and Dave and Bill about the Housing Committee.
We all recognize that across the Commonwealth, there has been a massive push for housing. And not to conflate the two issues because they're not related,
That's
but
right.
the state passed the MBTA zoning act,
Yep.
which pushed communities across the Commonwealth to start taking action towards housing. But the city took an initiative as well, starting the Housing Committee. And I think the Housing Committee was started during
2023.
2023-ish.
Yeah. It was towards the end, I think. Yeah.
So I think, we want to talk a little bit about the background of how we got there.
Absolutely. Right, so the city put together a housing committee, essentially.
It was put together through the planning department. So the planning director,
That's true.
right,
Yep.
organized the committee. And from what I understand, it was supposed to be a cross-section of developers, all department heads, people in the planning board, a couple city councilors.
Meetings were happening at, I believe, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning.
On a Friday.
To get a cross-section of the community, that's a really challenging time to do it, especially to get residents involved.
Yeah, and I thought the concept was wonderful. bring them all together,
Absolutely.
let's talk and all that. And we'll see history will show us what it morphed into. And
Well, what happened was it ended up having discussions specifically targeting the MBTA law.
Yeah, so I think that was the initial impetus of this this housing committee, was to really start looking at the MBTA law. The housing committee developed a zoning that was really condensed in Ward 1.
All in Ward 1, yeah.
And when that came to the council, I think it was made pretty clear by all of the councilors that that was going to be really tough for Ward 1 to stomach. in
just to
Ward
back
1.
up so people understand.
Sure.
What are we talking? We needed 2,200 units?
That's my
Correct.
recollection,
Was
yeah.
it? And as MBTA was written, that needed to be a half mile from the MBTA station.
Right.
Correct.
But they've kind of tweaked that. So now it's MBTA station and or
Bus
bus
stops.
station, which is good because we were able to spread that
Right.
requirement out throughout the city.
Right, and that is exactly what the council said.
That's right.
When we saw the first initiation of this, that this needs to be spread out amongst the city, and it went back, and that's what happened.
Right. And the city was under the gun and the city council was under the gun because we had to have this submitted to the state and approved by the end of the year.
The thing that's important, though, I think, is that there's a lot of state push. You have this MBTA process going on, which has a potential impact on the city. Then you have this whole ADU, which has a potential for impact on the city. So there's a lot of change going on, and we're not really sure how that's going to play out in the city. And now we're talking something that's totally different from all of that in the form of MU2, which could, as we see, can have a major, major impact. We haven't really figured out what the impact of the other stuff is,
That's
and we're
right.
rushing into sort of
Right.
doing this.
The next important part, which maybe you want to talk a little bit about, is how the committee moved forward after that MBTA Communities Act or zoning was implemented. It didn't stop there, and that's how we got to where we were with petition 15-25.
Yep. You want,
Yeah, so if we go now, we'll talk to what is the Housing Committee's
Absolutely, yeah.
perspective directly to MU2, which is the Orchard Hills development. On the August 29th, this is the first time that MU2 is brought up that I can see in any of the minutes. And basically, Mr. Boyle stated that, Mr. Boyle is, and I'm reading directly from the minutes, but Mr. Boyle is a hired employee consultant who works for the Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, and he was hired by our planning board, I believe, through a grant, and to help in the assistance of this. And he states here that he received a call from a developer that owns MU2 land and suggested look at MU2, look at the MU2. And so that's the sort of the first way it starts in here. And what I think is also important, and you won't see this reflected in any of the minutes from the Housing Committee, but there is a repository of documents that exist from the Housing Committee. And if you go to look at that repository, you'll see on a document that's dated on the same date, the 29th of August, and it says MU2, the name of the document is MU2 Zoning Suggestions from G. Liscotti, 29th August 2024. And clearly by its name, we can derive that this is the suggestions for changes for the MU2 district that were handed to the board on the 29th. Again, not reflected in the minutes. And this was a pretty substantial change to zoning. And to me, I think at best, the minutes should reflect that the developer or the owner of the land made these suggestions for MU2 to the Housing Committee.
I think it's also really important to point out that that's the only land in Leominster zoned MU2.
But
that's
your
the
point
one
is
parcel.
that this is
That's right.
significant acreage that is owned by one individual.
One individual, that's
who,
right.
made the recommendations of what would be best for the changes for that particular use.
And all in Ward 1.
Correct.
So the reason why this MU2 is only by itself. The general feeling was when we did when the mixed use was done, the fact that somebody changed the rules for the Walmart project had such a massive impact on the Orchard Hills project that the idea was, let's not have that happen again. Let's make sure that Orchard Hills onto its own has such a massive potential impact. Let's keep that zone by itself, so the change done to the same district, a similar district somewhere else, doesn't affect that one. You're looking at the one district in the city, and you know exactly what
Where
the
it is.
impacts is. It's not to be combined with other districts or other locations. Because one of the difficulties with zoning is somebody will give you a great cause for change of zoning in a district in another part of the city, and you say, that makes sense, and you change it, and then it has a negative impact all the way around.
That's right.
And we didn't want this. This was too big and too potential impact that was too big that we said no.
But to get back, you were saying that document, Mr. Lascotti, and then didn't Montechusett Regional Planning
Yeah.
submit a letter
Absolutely.
soon after?
Yes. So on their letterhead. So what? And I have it right here on their letterhead. So this was important. The 29th of August meeting. They're meeting basically once a month. 13 days later, there's no meeting of the Housing Committee. There's no record of this document existing in any of the minutes.
Or discussion, yeah.
Or discussion. Then on September 11th, there is in the same repository, it says memo from Joseph Boyle, MU2 zoning, 11 September. So 13 days later, there's a document, and it says, as part of its review of the Leominster zoning, the MRPC has investigated the requirements for residential development in the MU2 district, and it's put forth this list. Almost every single element in this document is verbatim for what the developer asked for.
Can you highlight some of those specifics, because that's what changed?
Yeah, density,
Directly,
the
yeah.
density table, which allows now, instead of being a by right density of 12.4 units, it now goes to 21.8 units by right, which means even more than what was allowed by special permit is now allowed by right. So we know there's a 55-acre subdivision in one location up there. There's another 27. So just for an example, 9 extra units given by right adds 450 units by right to be developed on one subdivision.
All these numbers get a little confusing to follow it.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
I see where some people and us as counselors could have been like, okay, are we talking about MBA? Are we doing that?
Right.
But the substantial thing that I thought came out of that was the lack, they no longer had to inform abutters.
Absolutely.
On
That was the
anything.
And that
removal
was
of the
because
special
the
permit.
special permit was
Anything under
removed.
20 acres, and if you look the way they broke up the entire park, everything fell under 20 acres.
Absolutely.
So, you know, and then we didn't know until
And I think
someone saw
when
a
this
tractor out there.
petition 15-25, which I referenced before, came to the city council, that
right.
confusion continued because when questions were asked by councilors, the answers to that specific
The
question
planning director,
about,
who was there by herself,
correct.
could not answer questions.
right,
Right.
you know,
and
would have
when
been-
that specific question about whether abutters would be notified by
Yeah.
my colleague was asked, it was made reference that the planning
special-
director thought it was over 20 acres and it would have to come before the council for an informational hearing, which it does not.
correct.
So just for the sake of importance on accuracy and facts here, there was a right of 12.4 units per acre, a much lower density, which didn't require a special permit. So technically, the developer, even under the old zoning, would not have had to notify the abutters. But there's no way that I think they would have developed under that low density. They would have asked for a special permit, which would have triggered it.
Yep.
But there was a window, I just want to make sure that we have the facts, there was a window of not to be able to notify the abutters. The one thing that's different is, in here, the representative from the the Montechusett regional thing said, let's replace the rule that says any project above 20 acres needs to go before the city council. He wanted it to put it before the planning board.
Oh, yeah.
But having said that, if you follow the next meeting, which is of the housing committee on 9/26, there is a reference in there to saying to item 4, which that was, and I'll state this. Ms. Frieda stated that item 4 is a problem. Mr. Boyle said there is a requirement that projects greater than 20 acres go to the planning board as opposed to the city council. Ms. Frieda says that if you go to the city council with something that big, the people have a voice to come into the meeting. She thinks there should be an opportunity for people to have an outlet to speak.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that item 4 was removed. and it was brought up in the housing committee by Councilor Frida. And yep.
Right on that exact topic, it was interesting in the last planning board meeting that Joe Boyle from the MFPC basically made the comment in front of the planning board is that was intentional. We don't want to get neighbors involved because they muddy the waters. I'm paraphrasing, but it was.
Highly recommend that people view that part of the recording. It's very late. It's after 11 p.m. at night on the timestamp. But I think it's critical that the consultant for the city spoke that as an objective of what he wanted with the zoning ordinance, what he as the director of this housing committee wanted to see that neighbors would not be involved and that the special permit would be removed. And again, because they slow down the development. And I don't think that that's in spirit with what the city council would want for our city constituents.
No.
Absolutely not.
No, and it's not consistent with the mission of the planning board. It's not consistent with the mission of responsible planning. Neighborhoods, residents are all supposed to be part of the process.
I think it's a myth that's also being promoted by the state that you cannot have a special permit in housing.
Right.
I think that myth needs to be broken in a big, big way. I mean, if the purpose of zoning, which is clearly stated in the zoning ordinance, basically says quality growth and protect the integrity of the neighborhoods, you can't do the second part. If you say, hey,
Leave them out.
we are going to purposely leave out any special permits because we want to take the voice of the neighbors out. And that was, I mean, it is important to watch that clip because it's unbelievable, in my view, that a representative of our planning board, who's a hired consultant, would say that.
Right.
Or even think that, but not, he spoke it.
Yeah.
Along with the January 13th meeting of the city council, when the planning director came down to answer questions, it was conspicuous by its absence that the chair of the planning board was not there.
That's right.
Mr. Boyle wasn't there. And really, if we wanted like the cards on the table, why wouldn't the developer just come down, as you've said before, Dave, and say, listen, here's what my project is. This is what we'd like to do. We're going to add a lot of housing. Now remember, this is housing that's not for the local residents.
That's right.
Because the rates they're going to charge, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Just for comparison's sake as well, as I mentioned before, other issues that the Housing Committee and MRPC have worked on and have come before the City Council. And on all of those occasions, the planning director and the representative of MRPC has always been there, except on this specific issue.
Always to answer
and I think
questions.
that's important to call to point, because I think some of the questions that the council had could have been answered if there were more people there.
Transparency is very simple on this. You come down to the city council and says, this is the idea of the project that we would like to build, and these are the zoning changes we need to make that. That's transparency. And the final point to the housing committee reinforces that. There is no discussion on MU2 in October. The final discussion on MU2 happens in November, and it's very short. And it says this, Mr. Boyle, this could be, when he's talking about the MU2, Mr. Boyle, this could be the potential for a lot of units. Mr. Sousa stated that he expects this to happen. The developer is already working on the plan. Now think about this. In January 13th, you were going to make a vote as to change the zoning, but back in November,
He's got the plan.
they already know it's a lot of units. They know its size. They know that the planning director is talking to the developer. He says he's already working on the plans. So in November, they already had the size, the density they were talking about. They knew you can't draw plans if you don't know what the density is going to be. So they already had it in the works. In November,
The process didn't work.
The process did not work, and the process didn't happen like it's happened in the past. So nefarious or not, I think it was unusual. To send somebody down to the city council to answer questions about a zoning change, to present the zoning change to the city council for approval, and not be able to answer fundamental questions.
Right. On our website, we will have the video clips of questions that were asked and how they were answered.
Yep.
And I'll leave it to people to come up with their their own judgment, because it's
Right.
pretty powerful stuff.
Right.
But it's also what is not said at that. The Ward 1 councilor asks, how many units are we asking? That's a
Absolutely.
math equation that you figure out for density. And,
It's
and there
simple.
was no answer given to that.
Very
and
simple.
so there's a lot of what is just not said.
Did the full information get out?
No, the information, I think, was incomplete. In some cases, it was misleading, and it certainly wasn't detailed in any kind of way. So, more information. We are going to have links that you will be able to follow for more information. I would encourage you, as other folks have said, to watch the public hearing on the zoning change on January 13th, 2025. Right up front is the public hearing. Please watch it because you will really understand what happened. So right now we're going to move on, and we need a little bit of a break because we're going to have Hailey join us. Well, now we have been joined by Hailey Brady, and we want to talk with Hailey and Donna about community impact of this, and then also all of the really good work that you guys have been doing on responsible growth for Leominster. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, so it kind of surprised me when you hear this density, you hear these numbers, and I like research, I like numbers, I like facts. So I started looking into, well, what are the capacities of our school? What's the breaking point? How many apartments, complexes, how many people could we bring in until it is a problem?
Yep.
How many police officers do we need? Not saying we can or we can't handle it, but let's get an analysis. That information is not that easy to come by.
That's right.
And it is not that easy to figure out. And I just found it so challenging to really give an educated guess. Can we take on 1,700 more residents in one area? Can we not? So why don't we work together to try to understand what we can take, what we can't take, and kind of have an informed conversation about it moving forward. You would hope the planning department might look into that, but hasn't really happened. So I feel like as residents, if we care about our schools, our environment, our emergency response, whatever it is that you care about, why don't we have a discussion and know what responsible growth looks like?
Those are all really important topics, and also I think people need to understand there's a cost to that. We're going to have additional, people like to talk about the additional tax revenue. Guess what? Additional public safety people, additional schools, additional classrooms. Those cost real taxpayer money.
And a project this size will really impact all of those
Absolutely.
critical services.
The planning board the other night, having 3 overtime police officers there,
Yep.
why are the taxpayers paying for that? This is it's a community meeting.
Right.
These are discussions. You shouldn't want to silence the community's voice. You should be listening to every single person speak and taking it in because they live here. They care about this place. They have businesses here. They have families here. That's who's going to grow your community, not a national developer.
Absolutely.
Well, it's interesting if you look back on history, and I brought this up the other night. Leominster spent a lot of money, and a decision that I thought was a great decision was on Cholin Farms. And the justification for buying the development rights, which was a lot of taxpayer money, most of it grants and whatnot, was about the fact that there was going to be a huge development to go in there, single-family home development. And the impact of that on the infrastructure for schools and whatnot was worthwhile to protect that space, that open space, and invest a huge amount of money to buy the development rights. This scale of this site, as it is allowed by right today, would dwarf any of that.
Donna, do you want to talk a little bit about the work that you've done
Absolutely.
Sure.
to those concerns?
Well, I think that the biggest awareness that initially brought me onto this was the fact that the Orchard Hill Park Development site is primarily wetlands.
That's right. That's right.
So there are vernal pools in the area. The abutters have vernal pools in their land, in their backyard, that is adjacent to and abutting this large project. It's fascinating to me that I do live on the street, Sky Lane, and my neighbor who has wetlands in his backyard, as an abutter, the way that my property is zoned, if I wanted to put a shed in my land, on my land, I have to be more than 100 feet from his wetlands. But he does not have that same protection when an out-of-state developer is assaulting the MU2 zoning. They can build up to within 50 feet. And that is only if the planning board elects to give them that buffer. So as a neighbor, it really started as an environmental concern. I love the out of doors. I walk my dogs every day, several times a day in that area. And in the Leominster Trust Conservation Area that was mislabeled by the developer as owned by the city of Leominster, this out of door space, I see bald eagles. I see all sorts of wildlife. We see vernal pools. So it was questioned both at the most recent planning board meeting and in the past publicly by the developer. Someone had asked, why didn't you develop this? Because it used to be labeled as wetlands.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there was some work that was done to redraw the wetlands boundaries, and that work specifically ignored 2 vernal pools on the target property. They are now going to be proposed to be bisected by a footpath of traffic over to the mall. So the point would be, Sue, that it was the environmental assault, the total disregard and disrespect of a limited source resource that we have that really caused me and I think Hailey to become involved and aware.
That's absolutely where it started. Looking at the plans at the beginning, how can you do this? I've walked these trails my whole life. I grew up in this neighborhood. Now I own a house, same, area. I know what's out there. I grew up catching the frogs, the tadpoles, and playing in the woods. And I'm looking at the plans, and it just made no sense how they could ignore these areas and how it wasn't checked up on. The reason those vernal pools are certified is because me and a couple other neighbors went out and caught some salamanders and documented them. Why didn't anybody else,
Well, my concern was that at some point they put up no trespassing signs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Immediately, as soon as they started to pursue this, and our group became more concerned. We were told not to trespass there. So we respect those boundaries. However, these are individuals that live on that street that have lived there for generations.
Absolutely.
That's not responsible community growth. We open communications and dialogue to anyone who wants to build in that area. At one point, this was not a street that existed before. There's been work and development, and in order to grow as a city, we need to have open communications, and that's what we're looking for. So what started as a very dense, intense defense of a small piece of land that was being assaulted for the purpose to protect the wetlands has really grown into voices of community that want smart growth. We want responsible growth. That's all we want. We want to be able to know that our voices are heard as part of the solution and that we are not seen as the problem. When you have a housing committee chairperson stand up and say the purpose of this is to remove special permit so the neighbors and abutters do not have a voice in stalling the developer's efforts, I just cannot get behind that. I feel offended as a taxpayer and as one who cares about this city. So we did start Responsible Leominster, and so that we are Leominster for responsible growth. If you want to be a part of that, we welcome people to come and join and say that you care about the development. You know, in talking to some people about this particular development, it has been described as a 1950s maximum growth, maximum usage, basically wiping out whatever is in its way, like you would in the 50s. That is inconsistent with what we need.
Absolutely. There are beautiful trees. I mean, it's a beautifully forested area with lots of wetlands.
You know, it is, and it's a community. There's trails throughout those woods that link up, on that property to the conservation lands. Those trails were maintained by neighbors with tractors every year, brush cleared so that, we were connected to each other. And this just...
No, the way that this has been
over it.
handled is just really, I think, I use the word, horrifying, to tell you the truth. I think that's really the case.
We have an opportunity with Brandon and yourself when you put together the petition and 112 local Ward 1 residents, or at least Leominster residents signed it, we have an opportunity to take another look at this.
That's right. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit more, just so we can talk about how things will look moving forward. I think, as Donna just mentioned, Councilor Chalifoux-Zephir, myself, and the Ward 1 Councilor Robert Tossi filed a petition 9-26 that will affect MU2 zoning. So as Dave talked about earlier in the show around the removal of the special permit, the buffers, some of the ways that the ways that this could be developed between needing a certain amount of industrial first before housing could come, all of that stuff will be put back in the MU2. And I think that's the first critical step, because of the fact that if MU2 stays as it is, as Dave said at the planning board meeting the other night, we're going to have MU2 requests across the city, because you can put in a density of 21 units per acre. That's some pretty thick density. So that's step number one.
And there's 66 more acres.
That's right.
That falls under this same density. You know, this is phase 1 with 296 units. Well, what happens on that? That's in 17.95 acres. What happens to the other 66 acres? How many thousands of more people can be right there?
And that's part of why we changed our messaging. The first phase is all wetlands, and it's not all, it's majority wetlands, significant amount that is going to be impacted and destroyed. And that is horrific. But when you look at the rest of the parcels inside of the one MU2 zone, or the one district, they are not necessarily in a wetlands protected area. So we don't have the Conservation Commission to be able to assist in defending that. So that's why Responsible Leominster, or Leominster for Responsible Growth, was changed. It was born out of the existing concern for smart growth, for strong community, for people to build with us and not against us, but not necessarily in an area that is just protected by the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act.
Right. I love what you say, Hailey. It's not yes or no.
Yeah, it's not yes or no to housing. We need housing.
Right.
We need affordability. It's
how.
And do it smart. Have these conversations. Have these, discussions
with the community.
With the community. These are people that, built their houses here, spent their whole lives here, own businesses here.
Raised families.
As a new homeowner, Hailey, who doesn't live on that side of town, but I think you said it best the other night. You dumped your whole life savings into making Leominster your home. Myself, the same. I get it. And I think that's why this petition is so important, to put the zoning back. And on that point, the process continues, right? That petition is still before the city council. There is a legal affairs subcommittee meeting tomorrow night, Thursday at 6 p.m., where this issue will be taken up. And then again, there is a public hearing and a potential discussion on this at the city council meeting this coming Monday. So there's still a lot to come on this petition regarding the MU2.
I just want to say that I applaud, especially the young people that are getting involved and the people that hear about having a voice. And I think what bothers me the most about this process is the first attempt was to change the zoning in a sort of general discussion about we just need more housing without any specifics, when they knew specifically what they were doing.
Absolutely.
So this is like, let's just first change the zoning, and once we've got the neighbor's voice out of it, once we've got the citizen's voice out of it, then we'll deliver the project specifics. And to me, that is the most insulting thing to the residents and the taxpayers of this city, that you weren't even given the respect when they knew what they had to say. Here's my project. Here's the zoning changes I need for this project.
Yeah, and
they
let's
didn't
talk
want to do
about
that,
it.
and it openly admitted that the consultant said,
Yeah, keep them out.
that's what we wanted. I followed the rules.
When we look at the number of people who have quickly responded to our calls for community involvement, we have hundreds and hundreds of people who have opted in through our first Save Orchard Hill Wetlands website and now Responsible Leominster website. We have hundreds of people who have asked for a yard sign. We're not charging for the yard signs. If you want to show your support, if you want to become in any way involved and maintain open dialogue with the city, we would encourage people to go to Responsible Leominster. So Responsible Leominster is a portal for you to be able to, as a citizen of Leominster and a concerned resident, to be able to get access to this information, to continue the dialogue with the developers, to work together, to building with us and not against us.
And to get the information out, because I think that's what's really missing. The detail, the devil is in the details, right?
And I think Dave touched on the transparency issue, and I can't tell you how many hours and hours of FOIA requests and research just to get the bare minimum. That's not, it shouldn't be like that. You should know what's happening around you and in your communities so you can participate.
This isn't a Ward 1 issue either.
It's not, absolutely
It's a
not.
citywide issue.
That's
The
right.
precedent is going to be established with this density here, and it's going to be throughout the city. We just saw Ward 2 go through a gut-wrenching battle
That's right.
on protecting the integrity of their neighborhoods. It's going to be in every ward, in every neighborhood, with every issue. You follow the minutes for the zoning of the housing committee. By the way, they're not just talking about housing.
I know.
I saw one discussion, why don't we create a new business district and why don't we put a convenience store in by right? So the point is, you have to pay attention to zoning, and this isn't just a Ward 1 issue, it's a city issue.
Absolutely, there's no question about it. Anybody have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I just want to thank all of you and Bill for joining us today, and for all of your hard work and your continued work to bring it to a larger scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
encouraging to
Thank
see
you.
more people getting involved.
Absolutely. But you guys are doing the heavy lifting and have been for a while. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bill. So I would just like to say to the community and folks who are watching, please, follow the links that we provide, get some information yourself. You don't have to take our word for it. You can read all of the information yourself. And please stay tuned, because this is an ongoing issue and concern, and I suspect that we will be back. So thank you once again for joining us today.